The Texans travel to Arrowhead to take on the Chiefs. They've already got the division. Will they get more? Let's talk about all that and more on this edition of the Bullpen.
To throw the punches on. He floats one wide open, and there he goes. Turned down for a Texan touchdown.
Hello and welcome to the Bullpen. I am James Roy. As always with me is Tom Chavrier. Tom, how are you doing today?
I'm good. I'm excited for Saturday. I think, we've got some stuff to talk about that we didn't have before, and it's going to make for an interesting football game.
For sure. Well, I'm driving and Tom is not doing that. So it's not technically a commute. I am commuting, but Tom already commuted. But I figured this was probably the best way to do it with our schedule. So here we are, ready to talk Texans, ready to get into this matchup. The first question I have for you really centers around what I said at the beginning. The Texans already have the division. They have the playoffs. There's an off chance they get the 2 seed. Probably more likely they could pull the 3 seed with some pretty good performances. How do you feel about the vibe for this Texans team going into this final stretch of the season? Do you think that they're motivated to get out there and improve their seeding, or do you think it's about just playing their game and scouting these teams that they could possibly be playing in the postseason?
I definitely feel like they're motivated to prove something to, the next couple of teams they play on the schedule. Obviously, they're looking up at Kansas City and Baltimore in a sense, because Baltimore knocked them out of the playoffs last year, and you really feel like these are going to be measuring sticks for them. Where do we stack up? What do we need to improve? How close are we? How far away? So I do believe that D'Amico Ryans will use that. I do believe that this is an opportunity for, the Texans to play their best ball against a quality opponent and really, signify to themselves and their fans that, hey, we can make a deep playoff run. And this year is a year where we can do some things as opposed to being, just ahead of schedule.
Yeah, and I think it's a combination. It's like kind of a pride thing, kind of a, let's see what we can do here. I think the pressure is off, though. I think that before, if Indianapolis had managed to beat Denver with their cupcake schedule that they have the rest of the year, it would have become a thing of like, okay, well, now we know Indianapolis is likely going to win out, or at least they have a clear path to it. So then it puts that pressure to win at least one of these games. Obviously, it's not as much pressure as some would think with the Titans coming afterwards, but with the loss to the Titans earlier in the season, there's not a certainty as there is now with having locked up the playoffs. But I think the big thing is that makes this game important is the fact that Patrick Mahomes is going to play. So with that, how do you feel Patrick Mahomes playing affects this? I think that Mahomes playing is not as impactful as it's been in the past, but it is still Patrick Mahomes. So, what are your thoughts on him playing and how it impacts the game?
I think it's very important. I think it's more important to the Texans than I think it is to the Chiefs. I think obviously, the Chiefs don't have anything to prove to anybody. They're very good. This is a team that has won titles. Most people feel like they're one of the best teams in the AFC. So whether or not I think they come out of this football game, on top, probably isn't going to do a whole lot. For the Texans, though, for them to get a win with Mahomes under center will probably resonate more, give more confidence to a team that's probably looking for it, that, we can play with this Kansas City team, that it's definitely not as one-sided as, a lot of the national media, I think, feels with this game. And obviously, you want Mahomes to be 100%. I don't think he's going to be 100%, but I don't think he has to be 100% to be very effective either. So for the Texans, I think it's very important to them to really, show up and be able to say, hey, we have confidence going into the playoffs that we can beat anybody.
Yeah, I think that's important. and you're right. Him not being 100%, still, there's going to be some Chiefs fans who are like, well, yeah, you beat, if the Texans were to win, I'd be like, you beat us, but like Mahomes wasn't even 100%, which I think kind of leads into my next discussion point, and I'll talk about it briefly here, which is that there's more similarities with these two teams than I think a lot of people would give credit towards. And I think it's because of the way people view the Chiefs as this championship, dynasty, that they don't want to admit that in their current form they're very similar to what the Texans are. It's an offensively struggling team that relies on the defense to kind of carry. And obviously the Chiefs and the Texans to some extent have both played really well in one-score games, which is another similarity between the two teams. But at the end of the day, I look at Patrick Mahomes playing, and the thing that it affects for me is that at the end of the game, I still believe whoever has the ball last is going to win, because I know that CJ and Patrick have both maybe not played their best football in this season, or for Patrick Mahomes in recent years. But they're still quarterbacks that when they have the ball in their hand and the money's on the line, that they can step up and do their thing and lead their team to victory in those one-score games. So that's mainly what that affects for me. To speak to who's coming back, they got Pat Mahomes is going to play. Hollywood Brown, I believe, is supposed to return this week. Is there anything between who's returning or between what's on that Chiefs offense that gives you reason to be concerned relative to how great this Texans defense has been?
I mean, like you said, the Texans defense has really been playing phenomenally. So you feel confident that no matter who they line up, that they're going to be able to have success. The dude that everyone circles, and you should, and rightfully so, is Travis Kelce. He's probably had a little bit of a down year, but the guy is still elite. And I think that if they are able to get him going, that could create some problems. Once upon a time, I would have said DeAndre Hopkins. You got to circle him. I mean, Houston. Everyone in Houston knows what he can do. I will not say that his best years are behind him, but I will say that he hasn't, to this point, proven to be the super weapon that I thought the Chiefs were getting when they got him. Hollywood Brown, it'll be interesting to see what he looks like coming back from injury. I feel like with a lot of other players, and we've talked about it in our shows before, that players got to get back up to game speed, and that not everybody performs well right out of the gate coming off injury. Some people do, and maybe Hollywood Brown could go off. I love what the secondary has been doing lately with Derek Stingley Jr. and Kamari Lassiter and Kalen Bullock. So I feel pretty confident that they should have an answer there, but we'll have to see. The more interesting thing I'm really curious about is the fact that Kansas City will be without their left tackle. So we talk about the defense and their ability to get to the quarterback, and they have two pass rushers with double-digit sacks, and now you're going to be limited on your offensive line and a less mobile quarterback. That's the matchup that I think the Texans have to win for them to have success on Saturday.
Yeah, and I was I don't know if the episode will be out now, but I recently went on Chiefs Daily News podcast with Haley Lewis, and I mean, I was like, I don't want to be dismissive of what the Chiefs are or their talent offensively, but like simply put, like we talked about in last episode, this Texans defense at all levels, it's really hard to pick what even is the best part of it, because there's so much to like about it that like it's not really the Chiefs' talent that is concerning me, or that isn't concerning me. It's just that I'm so confident in this Texans defense that I feel like they can take care of it. I know that in some games, like against the Cowboys, they gave up 300 plus passing yards to Cooper Rush. And I was like, that was kind of always going to be the game plan, because Cooper Rush was going to be throwing it 300 times. So like I wasn't really concerned. No one was looking at that and going, oh, this defense sucks. They gave up 300 passing yards to Cooper Rush. Whereas there's been other games where that may have been more concerning. I think about Desmond Ridder or Zach Wilson last year putting up 300 yards on the Texans. But yeah, I mean, as far as it goes, Hollywood Brown, DeAndre Hopkins, great talents. I'm just like looking at our defense. That's why I'm looking internally at the Texans and going, yeah, they've not given me any reason to be concerned, so like I'm not. But we've talked enough about the Chiefs offense here. The Chiefs defense is really the concern. Like I said, the Chiefs and the Texans, very similar teams, and with Chris Jones on the interior and a lot of things going on in that Chiefs defense that are going well, you have to think that what we really want to see in this game is the Texans offense prove that they can take on a defense like that. So do you think, in your heart of hearts, just looking at this matchup, that this Texans team is on offense specifically is going to be capable of taking on this Chiefs defense?
I do. I really like what they were able to do as far as moving their right tackle to left guard in Titus Howard. I think that's going to help with Chris Jones specifically. So I'm hoping that gives the offense time to move the football, CJ time to pick out weapons. Clearly, other teams that they have played in recent weeks have been able to score on Kansas City, so I feel like the Texans should be able to score the football. I don't believe that they're gonna struggle to move up and down the field. Like you said, it really kind of boils down to what you think is a one-score game, and them being the Texans being able to finish on the road. They've been really good at finishing at home, not so much on the road. We'll see if they can change that this Saturday.
Yeah, I mean, and I've looked at I found out the weather report in my time talking to Chiefs fans on Haley and our podcast, and it's supposed to be under 40 degrees. It's sunny. It's a sunny Kansas City day at Arrowhead, but I agree with you that the away element definitely plays a factor in it. And also comparing the Chiefs defense to the Texans defense, I don't want to talk down on the Texans defense by doing that, because I think the Texans defense is elite, and I think that the Chiefs defense is they're similar in the fact that they're both kind of carrying their team. I'm not quite sure the Chiefs defense is as elite as the Texans defense. I haven't really done the research to back up statistically which one's better, or watched enough of the Chiefs defense play, but I do know that the Chiefs offense is not what's carrying them through all these games. So to do with that what you will. But so looking at specifically the interior offensive line for the Texans, do you think that they might? So they activated Kenyon Green, or designated him for return, and he's coming back. He might play this week. Do you think they stick with Titus Howard at left guard, or do you think maybe they give Kenyon Green some run in there?
I would like to see them stay with what they've got. I think right now this is a really tough spot to kind of reinsert Kenyon Green, who's been out, and away from the team for so long, as far as like the starting unit in a game setting. So for me, maybe rotate him in, I guess, a little bit, but definitely not start him there. I would like to think that, this is something that the Texans are very keen on. The offensive line struggles isn't new, so right now in a game that you feel like is very important, you probably don't want to change too much, especially because you're trying to develop chemistry and a rapport on that offensive line. Moving such a fixture like Titus Howard inside, I think it's probably more important for him to really, stay there for at least a couple more games to kind of build that chemistry, feel better, because he's really moving from having to start his movement probably to his left to now starting his movement to his right. So I think if you're going to move him there, you might as well leave him. We'll see ultimately what they decide to do. The name of the game is going to be stopping Chris Jones, in my opinion, and hopefully they're successful doing it.
Yeah, and I think you're right. Consistency is really the key, sticking with that lineup. I think that I've spoken to it. I mean, this Texans offense has improved in a lot of ways over time. Generally speaking, the product that's being put out by the Texans offense is still not really acceptable. There's always room for improvement, and there's definitely room for improvement with this Texans offense. But it's gotten better, and I think one of the things is the shuffling of the offensive line, and I'd like to see them stick with that for this start. And it kind of brings me to my next point, which is that with the offensive line showing some signs of life, right? Not like earth-shattering changes or improvements, just at least a little bit better than it was before. Um, CJ Stroud, this is the last question I'll ask before we kind of give our predictions and do the storybook ending. What are we expecting from CJ in this game? Like, what is the line, the acceptable performance for CJ in Arrowhead, where we go, yeah, CJ had a good game?
That's a really tough question because all in all, I think a lot of people would think he didn't have a great game, myself included. He didn't have a great game this past game, but then his quarterback rating was over 100. So it's got to be like what you value. Do you value the win? Then you don't necessarily care about him lighting up the stat sheet. Do you want him to be statistically effective? Then maybe he's got to throw the ball for 250 yards, 260 yards, and a couple scores. Ultimately, for me, if the Texans win the football game, I'll be pretty much happy with a turnover-free effort, and that'll be good enough for me. If we talk about these Texans, a few days from now, and CJ turned the ball over or CJ missed a touchdown, I'll probably be hypercritical. If they win, you don't necessarily care because those are tough environments to play in. You understand, it's hard to be really good in that situation. So the fan base is definitely gonna want to look towards his numbers to identify whether or not CJ showed up or not. I'm just gonna be thrilled if they win.
Yeah, I think that depending on how you view wins, whether you view them as a QB stat or independent of quarterback play, I think everyone will take issue with CJ's play if his game's not perfect in some way, or at least a significant chunk of people. It seems to be the trend that we're heading towards. But overall, for me, you kind of touched on it. Like I've been saying it for weeks now. A good CJ Stroud performance right now features no turnovers. That's like the bare minimum. I mean, I'm not as concerned with yardage at this point either. Like I thought last week, even though he had the fumble, he didn't throw any interceptions. He threw 2 touchdown passes, and he had a pretty decent completion percentage. Like I could see why his numbers put up a higher QB rating, because yards maybe don't factor as heavy into a QB rating as touchdowns and not turning the ball over in the air. So for me, that's like the big thing. If we got a similar game from last week to this week and we just like dropped that fumble, I'd like to see him get over 200 yards just because for me, like you're an NFL QB throwing for under 200 yards, it feels like the 30s. I don't know. But like either way, as long as the offense is moving, like when we look at it, we put the eye test to it. Like honestly, watching the game against the Dolphins, it didn't register to me how few yards CJ had thrown for until really late in the game, because for significant portions of the game, it felt like the offense could move. And so I wasn't like hyper focused on that. But there was a lot of statistical shortcomings for this offense against the Dolphins in hindsight. But overall, like I said, CJ's good performance features no turnovers. That's really it. And with that, we'll get into our score predictions. Tom, I want to hear what do you think the final score is going to be in Arrowhead this Saturday?
It's going to be close. It's going to be not what I hope that happens. I'm just trying to objectively read this thing. You spoke to it. You feel like whoever's got the ball last is going to win. I feel like all season long, Kansas City has had the ball last, and they found a way to win. I feel like this would be no different. I really see this game being, if I take my bias off, if I take my Texans cap off, this is a 24-21 Chiefs win. That's the way I see it. I would absolutely love if it was the other way around. But the Chiefs have been able to do it all year long, and it's just painful, and I just see it being that way again.
It's funny you say that too, because I literally gave the same prediction just earlier today, and that's what I'm sticking with. But I'm not going to remove my Texans bias here. I'm going to go ahead and give it to the Texans. If I'm doing a tiebreaker, and like you said, last person to have the ball wins the game. I'm going to go with the Texans 24-21. And for the storybook ending, it's a hard-fought battle. It feels like each team's exchanging blows, and it's 21-21, middle of the fourth quarter, the Chiefs with the ball, and it's starting to feel hopeless. Like, yeah, the Texans have kind of let it be this back and forth instead of like taking over. The offense feels like it's doing, good relatively, but the defense is really what's, helped the Texans to this point. Um, then the Chiefs are driving, they're running clock, they're having probably their best drive of the game. They're in field goal range, and they're basically trying to sit on the ball, approaching the 2-minute warning, and move it down the field. 2-minute warning hits. They run another play, maybe run like 15, 20 seconds off the clock. The Texans have used a timeout or two, and then the Chiefs snap the ball, and on the handoff, Patrick Mahomes is handing it off to Pacheco, and lo and behold, Christian Harris just barrels into the backfield and just blows up the handoff and knocks the ball out, picks up the fumble and returns it like 20 yards, puts the Texans at midfield. And then C.J. Stroud, he goes ahead and hits Tank Dell on a nice route, a nice little corner route to put the Texans in field goal range really quickly. They hand the ball up the middle to Joe Mixon a few times and run the clock. And then Kaimi Fairbairn hits a nice 35-yard field goal to take us home. So that is my storybook ending. And I know Tom hates my storybook endings because all of them are really close games that are really stressful, but that's also pretty much been the Texans this season. So it's a good guess, I think. But I don't know. How do you feel about it, Tom?
Well, if it helps anyone at all as a Texan fan, I have to choose this weekend between playing Tank Dell or Jaden Reed for the Green Bay Packers in a semifinal, and I'm gonna go with the Packers. So I believe Tank Dell will go off because I will not play him.
Oh, sweet! Wow, thanks for that, Tom. It's always nice to see someone sacrifice their fantasy score for the sake of the greater good of the Texans fan base. So thank you. I've made that sacrifice before. I sat CJ a few times just to make sure the Texans would get the win. So not that it was a hard choice. I had Joe Burrow as my other quarterback. So, I mean, it was not a difficult choice for me, but I did it. So, but yeah. All right. Well, Tom, any final thoughts before we kind of bring this thing to a close?
Yeah, I really feel like this is a game that I'm just going to sit back and enjoy. I hope the Texans make it a very interesting contest. This is a team that in my opinion, has designs for big and better things. And to do that, they're going to have to slay some dragons. And they get a chance to do that this week and next week. And I'm really hoping that we see that. I won't be too disappointed if we don't. I recognize what Kansas City is. I recognize what Baltimore is, and I'm not gonna, get upset if they're unable to do it. But it would be nice if they did.
Yeah, and I mean the big point for me is a competitive game, and the bigger point, like I think everyone agrees, this Texans defense is Super Bowl caliber, and should have the opportunity to play in the Super Bowl just based off how good it is. So it's not what anyone's watching. Obviously, it could become a problem if they start letting the Chiefs light them up. But the goal here is to get this Texans offense in, not even really into an elite status, just to see them perform at an acceptable level to give the Texans a legitimate chance at winning this game. So like I said at the beginning of the episode, the pressure of making the playoffs or not is off, but these next two games will be very good indicators for what we can expect to see from the Texans in the playoffs. We obviously already have a whole season to go off of how the Texans have played. That kind of gives us a feeling of what they're going to do in the playoffs. But teams progress and evolve throughout the season, and these two challenging matchups between the Chiefs against the Chiefs and then going Christmas Day against the Ravens are those late season games where maybe the Texans can show us something. They can show up in a way that makes us think, wow, this is not the same team that made me literally hate watching them play offense for the whole season with how bad they were and how incapable they've been of moving the ball on offense at times. So I mean, I'm interested to see this game from that perspective, without the pressure of like, hey, we need this win to make the playoffs. That's big for me. Thanks for listening, y'all. And as always, you can find me on social media at James Roy NFL on Instagram and Twitter. Tom is at TCTom1 on Instagram and at Third Coast Tom on Twitter, because someone on Instagram decided that Third Coast Tom was a cool username, but before Tom could. So that's why he's got two different ones. I'm going to start poking fun at you now for having two different ones, since mine are now the same.
I mean, I tried. I definitely kept it the same. I just had to abbreviate it.
You gave it your best effort, and it's basically the same thing. In case you forget what I said here and you're trying to find Tom on Instagram, it's just an abbreviation. But as always, thanks for listening. Stay classy, Houston, and vamos Texans. Thanks for tuning into The Bullpen, a Texans podcast. Please like, comment, subscribe, and follow along for more Texans talk from The Bullpen.
Take the handoff. Stroud looking. Stroud.